Meeting during this meeting.
Okay, I will call to order the Rolesville Town Board, of Commissioners Workshop Session, March 21, 2023. Hope everybody's doing well. Looks like we got a full board here tonight for the session. Don't have a whole lot of things on the agenda, so hope maybe a short meeting, but we do have a couple of pretty important items to cover, the mural committee and also presentation from the police department assessment. So with that, I don't have anything to announce other than I think it had a great Arbor Day, I think. So that went well, I think, and I believe the our farmers market got open this past weekend, which is a good thing for the season, I believe. So I think that was pretty successful from what I hear. So so spring is about to come, and we're going to move right on into the agenda and see if we can work through that. So unless the board has anything else, or the council, or either town manager, not hearing anything. So let's just start with item number 1, mural committee artist recommendation. Michael, I think you're going to do that one. So welcome, Michael. Hope you're doing well.
I'm good, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Board of Commissioners. I just wanted to take a moment to inform the board tonight that the mural committee has chosen an artist for the town mural project. The committee has selected Gabriel Eng Goetz from Durham, North Carolina, from among 33 artists who responded to our project RFQ. And let me see if I can pull up. No, I might not be able to, Robin, with the, oh, there we go. I can show, I included Gabriel's response to our RFQ in the packets, but here's his website as well, and kind of shows some of his work a little bit better. Like I said, we received about 33 responses, and the committee took a few weeks to review those and narrowed it down to 4 candidates that we each interviewed here at Town Hall. And Gabriel, with his experience and work and quality of work, rose to the top of the committee. I listed the committee members there in the packet as well in my memo. I didn't want to take up too much time unless anybody had any questions or if there were any concerns from the board. But after tonight, we would begin the process of entering into a contract with Gabriel over the next few weeks. This is the program again with Wake County Murals, United Arts Council for Wake County and their mural project, and so.
I had a question, Michael.
Yeah.
I saw that Ting was was agreeing to give us some money for the project as well.
Yep.
But then in the memo, I didn't understand, it was something about monies have to go to the actual artist, right? I guess 10,000 goes to the artist, is that correct?
The entire amount goes to the artist.
15.
The entire 15?
50, yep.
So I just felt like in there it said if we go over, do you foresee that we would go over that?
No, that's, when we sign the contract, we'll say that that's our budget, 15,000. So then we'll work with the artist to
Okay,
figure out
gotcha.
what amount of square footage of, and how much paint and how much of his time that means, knowing that 15,000
Is it?
is the maximum. I mean, if we think that a real, he suggests something, the committee believes we should do something extra, and maybe it turns out to be a couple $100 more, that's something the town
Right,
can.
I got you. But that's pretty much all inclusive.
Yeah.
And then, was there any idea where it would go? Was there any discussion about that?
Not at this time, and that's, we hope to work with the artist to kind of help us determine
that
some
out.
destinations. The
Gotcha.
program, ideally, the program asks for locations that are highly visible, highly trafficked, something that we think is going to be an Instagrammable spot. So probably up and down Main Street somewhere.
Well, yeah.
And the committee had met for a few months beforehand, and the more we thought about where could we put a mural in town, the more we discussed and liked this idea of maybe multiple muralettes or little murals.
Burlesque.
Yeah, that kind of represent a theme, whatever theme that we decide upon, throughout town at a couple different locations. So maybe it's 4 or 5 different murals of a smaller nature that kind of run through as you drive through Main Street or walk through different parts of town, including the park.
Yeah,
So,
gotcha. And the last thing I'll add is, I do think this is a good project going forward, should we have additional ones like this for the impending Appearance Commission. So I just wanted to share that.
Yes, well, and it came up with the committee as well, the mural committee, that this could just be the beginning of something bigger and
Right.
better. And so,
Exactly.
Yep.
Awesome. This is
Yeah,
great.
talk about that a little bit. You mentioned we, a couple of times. When you was talking about we, is that the Main Street Committee, or is that another committee?
Committee.
It's the mural committee. So we put together a mural committee. 2 members of that committee are on the Downtown Development Association as well, on the Main Street Committee. 1 member has come over from Parks and Rec Advisory Board. We have myself and Commissioner Vilga and Lindsay Owens on staff has been helping out, our communications specialist. And then the staff person from the United Arts Council in Wake County.
Yeah, and the reason I ask, and I think that will, since you got 2 members off of, I think Main Street Committee need to be, plugged in, especially if it's going to be on Main Street,
Yep.
They
Yeah.
need to somehow be,
We,
part of it as advisory or something,
Yep, we do envision some public engagement. It's going to be hard because we can't let, the entire community kind of, dictate and, where this will go and what it'll be. And, there's going to be a lot of voices out there. But the United Arts Council does have some suggestions and ways where we can kind of test stuff and throw out some ideas and at least get some general feedback through surveys or through, kind of a, here's some 3 ideas, rate your top 3, and just to, help with the committee. But, so there will be a few months of kind of public engagement to make sure this is something that's right for Rolesville, fits in with Rolesville, and something that everybody will be proud of.
How fast would this take place, Michael? Would this obviously be done before the project of Main Street is completed, more likely?
Yes, we're hoping over the next couple months, we'll meet with the artist and determine locations. He would start to design some drafts, and ultimately, probably by the end of the summer into early fall, we're looking at having something installed. The Parks and Rec department mentioned that, an unveiling around the time of the Fall Fun Fest could be something that
That's fast.
would work well.
That's fast.
Gabriel really surprised us. Some of these here, when we asked him how long they took, he did some of these in like a week.
Wow.
This
I'm
stuff-
just thinking of the where, and I
Right.
keep thinking about Cobblestone and Walbrook coming. I don't know if those would be better bookends for murals. So anyway.
Yeah.
Just something to think about.
Yeah, it's definitely, we got to keep that in mind with construction on Main Street and where, if new buildings are going to go up, is that going to hide a place that right now maybe looks like a great spot?
Exactly.
So we do have to be mindful of that.
What's that store, Family Dollar? Is that the name?
General Dollar.
Dollar General.
Dollar General.
Dollar
They have a nice wall that faces the street.
I thought the same thing.
I'm just saying they do. They have that blank wall that faces the street, but I know it has the challenge with the kind of dip down. But they do have a nice blank wall right there.
Wasn't Privet's building supposed to be? Yeah, it was, okay.
It was supposed to be what?
A mural was, I don't know if it was already commissioned or not to be displayed on
The
the
Privet
Privet
building?
building. And then, things happened and we,
They're definitely a property owner that has said they'd like to be included in the discussion, so.
yeah, because it was almost a done deal, but I forget what happened.
But to the mayor's point, I do think the Downtown Association should at least be brought in to say, hey, this is what we're doing, before it takes completely off.
We can make a point to make sure they're more involved.
Awesome.
Yep.
This is great. I'm excited.
So how does it work? Does he design something based on anything in particular, or does he just get creative and show you a sample
We'll
of what
talk,
can go out?
we'll talk to them about, history of Rolesville, themes of Rolesville, our recent brand and logo identity with the genuine community and capital connection, and we have some elements in our logo with the leaf and the bike. He'll do his research too of town and come visit us, and we'll walk up and down Main Street, and and ultimately, yeah, he'll present some ideas and drafts on paper that the committee can look at and kind of pick and choose and decide together on what would work best. So,
Yeah, and I just want to add, I appreciate everybody that's on the committee. I mean, there's a lot of hours spent on just even on, interviews. I think we spent probably 6 hours at least over 2 days interviewing people and stuff, and an hour and a half here, an hour and a half there, and people taking time out of their day to do something that's going to be great for Rolesville. So we greatly appreciate it.
How many people did y'all interview, artists?
4.
33 submissions, though? That is wild. I'm like, wow.
But yeah, that's with the help of United Arts Council. I think that really
That is
put it
cool.
out there, and we got a
Yeah.
lot of
That's awesome.
Good engagement.
We had to look at every single one. Everybody sent a package in. Everybody had their own thing. Yeah,
You're not short.
no.
That's all his work, Michael?
yeah, yep.
Wow.
And a lot of it's in, we even thought a little bit about our brand being Capital Connection and our connection to Raleigh. He's got a lot of work in Raleigh too. So if people were to visit Raleigh and then come up to Rolesville and kind of see some of the same style, might be kind of neat. But yeah, I think this is under a bridge in Durham. He did this Carolina Hurricanes
I
one.
love that.
So if you look at that, though, he's got a lot of symbolism that you wouldn't realize. So that's an actual map of a hurricane.
Yeah.
And he has there's smaller numbers on each one of those that represent when they were in the playoffs. So I mean,
Oh,
there's
really?
there's a lot of detail in there that just isn't shown up. You can't really see up front, but he goes into a lot of detail with it.
2007's in there? Oh, no.
09 down there.
I can see the mitts. The mitts and the hockey stick.
Thanks, Michael.
That's pretty cool.
Thanks, Paul.
Is that in Raleigh? Where is
Yes.
that located?
I
It
forget.
is in Raleigh?
I forget what building that is.
Oh, that's cool.
David.
That's the parking deck next to our building. Our building is in the background there.
Oh, yeah.
And the parking deck is where our staff parks.
Very cool. Look
Nice.
at that. Cool race.
Keep you informed.
That's good.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank
you, Michael. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Our next presentation is the Police Department assessment, and I think Certus will be presenting that. I will say before we start, I did run across the website SafeWise this week, and once again, second year in a row, Rolesville is declared the safest town in the state of North Carolina by stats, I guess you would call it, by stats versus population, which we beat out Elon again, which just kind of known for years and years being the safest town, so. For something be very proud of, and, like I made a little note that, the police department does a lot for those stats, but really we got good people living here. It's the people and the citizens and stuff that lives in town is the ones that make it safe, right, Chief? So
that's it.
I think you agree with that.
100%. I get a lot of compliments. Of course, we'd love to compliments anytime for our staff, but Chief, you're doing an awesome job, and I was like, I appreciate it, but it's not me. It's the men and women that are out there day in and day out protecting Rolesville. So all the gratitude goes to the staff who do an excellent job every day. So I appreciate the recognition. Thank you. Y'all ready?
Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good evening, Board, Mr. Mayor. As y'all know, one of the priorities for the board last year was, and that was you all had approved for budget. This fiscal year was an organizational assessment to be conducted for the police department. We sent out a proposal. We received 8 proposals from different consulting firms. Out of those 8, we interviewed 4. We narrowed it down to a team identified as Certus Public Safety Solutions. As the group, there was several different factors that went into, this was a very complex review of each one because we wanted to make sure we got it right. And we felt that this group was the best ones to come and provide an assessment for our police department. The decision was based on representatives' law enforcement experience, status as licensed attorneys, and their completion of projects of similar scope in North Carolina and around the United States. The assessment was very in-depth. I know y'all have heard me talk about it a couple of times leading up to this, but it was a very in-depth assessment. They were on site for 2 days with interviews with the town manager, police department executive staff, human resource director, several sworn and civilian members of the staff. Ultimately, they were looking at policy procedures, daily operations, response times, current plans that we have in place now, and for plans for future growth. All of this was explored. Excuse me. Ultimately, I brought the captain here with me tonight. He was a big part of this project because he's involved in a lot of the operations there at the police department. So he played an instrumental role in a lot of the interviews from the assessors. Without further ado, we do have a representative here on site tonight that I'd like to introduce to you. Dr. Paul O'Connell began his professional career in criminal justice in 1981, serving the New York City Police Department, first as a police officer, then as a police academy instructor, in-service trainer, and curriculum development. After receiving an MPA in 1984 and JD in 1989, he worked as a trial attorney with the firm Cummings and Lockwood in Stamford, Connecticut, specializing in product liability, negligence, premise liability, and personal injury defense. He is the former Associate Dean of the School of Arts and Science and former chair of the Department of Criminal Justice at Iona College in New Rochelle, New York. He is a full professor and teaches at both the undergraduate and graduate levels, conducts funded research, publishes scholarly papers, lectures widely on topics of police performance measurement, strategic planning, integrity management, and law enforcement training systems. He has also wrote several books, so if you'd like to look him up, he has several books. Without further ado, Dr. Connell.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Much appreciated. Well, good evening, everyone. It's on behalf of my colleagues at Certus, allow me to say it's quite a pleasure to be here to meet with you tonight to give you an overview of the assessment that was conducted. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and what we would like, it's really threefold what I would like to accomplish tonight. First and foremost, to introduce ourselves. My colleagues, I believe, are going to join us via Zoom, so I'm going to introduce you to the other members of the team in a moment. But other than telling you who we are, we'd like to cover what we were asked to do for the town of Rolesville. We'd like to tell you what our methodology was, how we went about doing this, and then most importantly, what the findings were. We produced a rather lengthy report, and I am not going to attempt to go page by page. What I'm going to attempt to do this evening is give a 30,000-foot view of the major recommendations. I brought many business cards this evening with my personal, both telephone and email. And I would ask any and all of you, if you would like to reach out to me offline or any member of the team for more detailed discussions about any of the findings. We're certainly available to do that. Okay. Robin, if they have joined us, Carol, if you could hear me, would you, I'd like to introduce Carol Razor Cordero, one of my colleagues.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank the town leadership for giving us the opportunity to work with your police department. I want to thank your chief and the captain and all the staff members at the department because they were very gracious in providing direction for us and taking time out of their busy schedules to sit down with us to go over documents and to interview them. And I can say it was truly a pleasure of working with your police department.
Hey, Carol, if you could you just briefly, your professional background, could you give us a quick synopsis?
Certainly. I served 25 years in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, retiring as a captain. When I was there, I taught all high liability areas, driving, firearms, defensive tactics. I ran their training division, their community services division. I was a detective in economic crimes and crimes against children. I oversaw court security, and I was the lead for the hostage negotiation team. After completing my 25 and a half years, I got an opportunity to start the gang investigation online program with St. Petersburg College. And then I retained staying on as a full-time faculty member for the Public Safety Administration bachelor's degree program. And I also have done consulting work for the last 8 years. Most of the time I did a lot of work with Monty and Paul and Jim, and they're a great team to work with. And I thank you all for this opportunity tonight.
Thank you, Carol. It's a pleasure also to introduce you to Demosthenes Long, Monty Long. Monty, could you please introduce yourself?
Good evening. My name is Monty Long, and I just want to echo Carol's comments in terms of both the project and the level of cooperation that we got from everyone in the police department. It was a wonderful experience for us as a team. My professional background, I was retired as a chief from the New York City Police Department. I had several command positions. I was the commanding officer of the police academy. I was the commanding officer of the school safety division. I was the commanding officer of the Office of Community Affairs. When I retired from the NYPD, I went one county north of New York City, and I became the undersheriff, first deputy commissioner of the Westchester County Police Department. I did that for approximately 5 years. And then from there, I went back to school. I got my doctorate, and I am currently a professor at Pace University in New York City, and I teach undergraduate and graduate level courses. And I have done consulting work for the past 10 years. That's where I met Carol, but I met Paul because we were recruits together when we swore into the NYPD, and I met Jimmy McCabe while serving in the NYPD. Thank you.
Thanks, Monty. The fourth member of our team, Dr. Jim McCabe, is absent this evening, but he has a wonderful excuse. He's home with his family welcoming the first grandchild on both sides of the family. Both mom and child and Jim and the rest of the McCabe family are very healthy and happy. So he sends his regrets. He'd be here otherwise. Jim was actually the lead member of our research team. CERTIS is made up primarily of the four principals who you've met. And we did the work, we do the work, we own the work when we do these types of studies. As a team, we've done approximately 100 studies, police assessments like this. scores of them the same size as the Rolesville PD. So we really do have a frame of reference for best practices in American policing. So I'd like to share with you now, if I could, the process, what we were asked to do, how we approached our work, et cetera, et cetera. So our understanding, this is from the original RFP, that the town of Rolesville was seeking a comprehensive assessment of current capacities and effectiveness of the police department in terms of its operations, its programs, its technology, et cetera, et cetera. I should note that the unit of analysis here is the police department as an organism. Does that department have what it needs to do its work? How does that department plan its work? How does that department assess its work? Those were the questions of the day. The objectives here were to do a comprehensive staffing analysis to share with the town really what the right size is currently for this agency. Are there any additional functions? Are there any areas that might need additional resources or staffing? Or is staffing, we've been to many jobs where staffing was simply out of alignment. There were too many people in patrol, not enough behind the scenes doing investigations or support. Essentially, we approach this looking for opportunities for improvement and planning ahead for a department in an obviously vibrant and growing community. We're trying to plan ahead. Our methodology, let me tell you briefly. Obviously, patrol is a major emphasis. We want to look at the men and women who are out there responding to 911 calls. So we performed a patrol workload analysis and staffing analysis. You'll see in the next few slides, I'll speak more to this, but what we did was we took a data dump from your CAD system, your computer-assisted dispatch system. We took a year's worth of data and calls. We downloaded that information, we analyzed that information. We did an overlay of staffing of police officers. How many police officers, not just the officers who were scheduled to work that evening or that morning, but how many actually did show up? And when you look through those two lenses, the workload, the work demands with the staffing, you can make some conclusions about right-sizing patrol resources. So we examined service demands for the Rolesville PD. I'll share that with you momentarily. And we looked at the shifts with the question in mind, are the shifts properly staffed? Finally, this is a major, major point, uncommitted time. When the officers are not actively responding to 911 calls, we analyzed what they were doing with their time and what percentage of their time is uncommitted. So this leads us into the master report that you see. It is filled with charts that look like this. Let me just again emphasize. We looked at call volume. All right, we got that information from the agency itself. We did the overlay of staff actually working. And then we brought to bear a method of analysis that we have used in all of our studies. Jim McCabe was actually instrumental in creating this rule of 60. And it takes some explanation. It is explained, excuse me, it is explained actually in the report, but allow me if I could. Our belief is that police officers should be, quote, actively engaged about 60% of their time while they're on patrol. That means they're responding to a 911 call or perhaps some self-initiated work. As they're driving around, they see a disabled motorist and they have to address that. The remaining time on patrol would be used for community engagement. You see, if police officers were simply responding to 911 calls 100% of their time, running from call to call, there would be no community policing, there would be no community engagement, and you would have probably some morale issues with your workforce. So that 60% threshold is the sweet spot. We believe that's the tipping point. That's what takes a good police department and then allows it to become better and more in line with the needs of the actual community. So if you look at this slide, the one on the left, you'll see in blue, this is hypothetical. This is not for Rolesville, but if I can, try to assist you in understanding, comprehending these charts. We don't want to overwhelm you. But in blue, during a 24-hour day, you'll see that from the hours 3 a.m. to about 6 a.m., relatively quiet in this hypothetical department. The blue is the actual 911 calls. The orange is the police initiated. That would be where the officers pick something up on their own. And then the actual staffing, however many officers were assigned during that time period, we've plotted that as well. So looking at this, we can make some conclusions about availability of officers to address the work at hand. We have been to communities, several, where the workload meets that, it exceeds the staffing, the current staffing. I mentioned to the chief on the way over, Jim McCabe and I did Flint, Michigan. And when we were there, Flint, Michigan, for the 2 days we were there, they were literally holding calls the entire time. And their officers were just running from call to call. And they were not able. The staff that was out there on any given shift was just overwhelmed, not able to handle the calls. That's a rarity. Most departments have data that looks somewhat like this. On the right, you'll see the workload graphed relative to that 60% mark. When we graphed Flint, Michigan, it exceeded it multiple times during a 24-hour day over the course of months. All right, that tells us they need additional staff. 60% is that, again, that tipping point. That's the threshold. So, bringing to bear the knowledge of my colleagues and the expertise that we've all, I think as a team, derived over all of these studies that we've done, we look at existing workload demand in Rolesville, and we ask certain basic questions. Is there a way for a differential response? Rather than sending a uniformed officer to every call that comes in through 911, could we perhaps address certain instances, certain situations differently? For example, you'll see in this graph, perhaps some departments have decided property damage only vehicle accidents. Perhaps in a parking lot where two cars collide, somebody's backing out of a CVS parking lot. They're not in a roadway, nobody's injured, and it's minimal property damage. Rather than dispatch Sector David or Sector 2 to come and do a report, those reports could be done online. Those reports perhaps could be addressed by a community service officer, someone who is not a uniformed police officer who can come and actually take these reports. Some calls could actually be addressed by other agencies. I'm sure you're all well aware that many communities now are struggling with how best to address mental health calls, people in crisis, mental health crisis. Perhaps the police should not be the go-to agency to have to resolve these issues by themselves. So crisis response teams are being developed by many departments around the country. This entails bringing in mental health professionals, et cetera. Several departments that we've seen have decided in downtown commercial areas, in the best way to address retail theft is to work with those retailers themselves and come up with some other way to address larcenies that take place in these chronic locations. Again, none of this necessarily pertains to Rolesville. I'm just trying to explain the methodology and what we've seen in our prior studies. So again, if you look at this chart, the yellow bar chart, if that's the existing workload for a police department, and if we're able to pull out those blue pieces, now we've got additional available time for those patrol officers to do other things, to engage the community, to build relationships with their community. This is what we looked to do in this particular study. We looked at the actual workload, we looked at available staffing, and we made several conclusions. One of the ways that we attempt to right-size the patrol function is to look at the schedules, to look at the shifts themselves. An initial question is, what is the ideal length of shift? Some departments do 8-hour tours, some 10, some 12, perhaps a hybrid with a power shift. Officers that can come in at certain times of the day, at peak times when demand is at its highest. So altering start times and end times of the officers is also a major consideration. Also, when it comes to charts, when it comes to schedules, the days off rotations obviously greatly impact staffing at any particular time. So, Certus was brought in to do this assessment, not just for patrol, but for the entire agency. Patrol is just one major function. But our methodology was certainly quantitative. And again, I think that speaks to the length and the detail that's contained in our final report. But it wasn't just quantitative analysis that we did. We also employed qualitative assessment techniques. Specifically, as the chief mentioned, we interviewed many people in the agency. Our attempt was to engage everybody, to speak to every officer, and to speak to both sworn and non-sworn members of the department. We conducted focus groups, met with officers as a group, we met with them separately. We did ride-alongs. We sat and actually watched the work be performed for the 2 days that we were here. This tells us quite a lot about the context, not simply the operations of the department, but the community in which, the environment in which it operates. And we looked, again, at the department as a whole, the entire organizational chart. As I like to say, we attempt to shine a light into all the nooks and crannies of all the various functions, property and evidence, training, et cetera, et cetera. So after having done this, in this particular engagement, we looked at a year's worth of data. As I said, the actual dates were November 1st to October 31st of last year. In total, we looked at 36,000 calls that were captured in the CAD system. And our report, again, contains many charts that look like this. Now, what is this? This, again, is the 24-hour day broken out. You'll notice the hour in the left-hand column. And this is that saturation index. This is that 60% threshold that we look for. Is there any time in a 24-hour period during this entire time that we've studied these calls where this particular agency exceeds that 60% mark? We use color coding here, these heat maps, if you will, tell us, if you take a look in the 7th hour at 7 a.m., the saturation index was 79%, that the officers were engaged actively 79% of the time. There is little time to do anything other than address calls when you're doing nearly 80% reactive policing. But that's only during that hour. And there's probably an explanation for that. All right, that particular time of day in a community like Rolesville, probably a lot of motor vehicle accidents. We looked at that. We looked to see the types of calls that were handled during that time period. So this, again, is the methodology that we used. This is the way to read and understand our analyses. And this leads us to, well, what are the conclusions? What did this research team conclude looking at this agency? Well, we had several recommendations with regard to staffing. We looked at the current staffing, we looked at the as-is, and we concluded that some subtle adjustments to the as-is situation could really yield some significant benefits in terms of efficiencies. This is the recommended chart. I'll probably go back to this in a moment. The conclusions that we came up with, probably best understood by just looking at the major staffing conclusions. We recommend reassigning one lieutenant from the patrol division to the support services division. We also recommended adding 2 sergeants to the patrol division. Now, the report explains in detail the reason for, we're not just simply recommending 2 sergeants. The reason for adding the 2 sergeants was the fact that this particular agency experiences frequently situations where lieutenants have to backfill the sergeant's position out on patrol. Overall, inefficient, not recommended. From a liability standpoint, lieutenants should serve as lieutenants. In order to make this reassignment, in order to shift the lieutenant over from patrol to support, no additional staffing is required. In terms of adding those 2 sergeants' positions, however, I'm sure members of the council are going to ask themselves, net, what does that mean? Are we going to go out and hire 2 additional sergeants? Does this increase staffing for this agency at all? The answer is yes, it does. Most likely, the most elegant solution here would be to take 2 of your current police officers, to promote them to the rank of sergeant, and to backfill those police officer positions. We also noted when we were here, and it's not an unusual situation for a department this size, and for a quality department of this size, it's not unusual to see command staff pitching in and doing a considerable amount of administrative work, clerical work sometimes, just to be efficient, just to get the job done. We noted that when we were here. The captain and the chief were observed doing administrative work, clerical work, that we believe could be more easily, more cost-effectively done by a non-sworn civilian member of the department. So you'll see in our report, we have the recommendation to add civilian personnel to that support services division. Not patrol, but support services. The purpose would be to assist that lieutenant who is now in that division in developing a wide variety of critical organizational functions. We also recommend to add a police officer to the position of support services in order to develop community engagement programs, in order to do training, in order to actually deliver training. You will note in this report, we believe that the failure to have a full-time training officer is somewhat of a liability. The quantity and the quality of training that this department undergoes is noteworthy. So it's not the matter that they're not being trained. The issue is more somebody in-house to actually direct it, to be the point person, to be the person to actually develop in-house training. So we believe that these recommendations that we've made would actually give greater capacity to this department at a particularly important time for this agency. As this community grows in population, there's going to be a much greater demand on this police department.
Sir, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Could the community engagement officer also work with that support services
Yes.
division? And I believe we have someone that's already certified to actually do that, right, Chief? Yes, sir. So is that a separate position that needs to be filled?
Thank you for pointing this out, sir. We focus primarily on functions. So our recommendation is we recommend a community engagement officer here. Whether that could be simply shifting somebody in their position. We've actually spoken with the chief. Jim McCabe has had discussions with the chief about the impact that these recommendations have on the current as-is staffing. And I believe the chief has some elegant solutions here as well. But Chief, unless I'm misspeaking, it's relatively straightforward to move that person over. The problem is the backfilling on patrol. If you were to remove somebody from patrol, you would have to backfill that position. The net in terms of our recommendations, I should say, come down to actually 4 individuals. 2 sergeants, as I said, 2 sergeants positions, 1 community engagement position, which we recommend. And then also in the area of non-sworn personnel, because of the volume of administrative work that's currently being done by the non-sworn member of the department, we believe that administrative support is required, is necessary. We'd strongly recommend an additional individual, perhaps at a management level. The exact title, executive analyst. Again, we focus primarily on functions. But an additional non-sworn member of the department would actually relieve both the chief, the captain, and the current individual who's doing records, requests, et cetera, and really streamline the process. And we think ultimately could actually result in cost savings for the town. But as the town grows, it's anticipated that the demand, again, records requests, just copies of reports and such, if this community grows by 10%, 15% over the next several years, the number of those requests are going to increase. And again, we recommend build capacity now. Don't wait for the system to get backlogged. We've been to many departments where they wait until the records department is completely overwhelmed, and then the city council, the town manager is overwhelmed with civilian complaints that their police department is not responsive. Now is the time to build capacity for this agency, and relative, we believe, to our recommendations, we believe will provide the department with maximum impact here. Okay. Let me just note this before I get to the next slide. In terms of community engagement, this is my second visit now to Rolesville. I was here for the site visit, and I've noted several new construction sites just since I've been here. Community engaged, to have an officer dedicated to traditional community policing, to do things like crime prevention surveys, to meet with members, homeowners associations, to have someone skilled who wants to do that type of work, to be the face of the agency. We're not saying that this work is not being done. It is. It's being done by all of them at a very high level. But in a growing community like this, we believe there's more than enough work for a community engagement officer. We were asked after we made our initial recommendations and we presented them to the chief, we were asked to project out with a growing community, what would the organizational chart look like at population 15,000, at population 20,000? And we provided that, 2 different organizational charts. One of the, some of you might note a subtle change that was made here. The captain's position here now is labeled as deputy chief. Certus believes at 15,000 at a department this size, where your patrol staffing has increased, that role is really more appropriately designated as deputy chief. So this is our recommendation at $15,000. I won't go through great detail here, but getting back to this issue of administrative support, you currently have a non-sworn civilian member of the department who is doing records and admin. We strongly believe, if you take a look here, that the appointment of an administrative manager, or, as I said before, executive analyst, some non-sworn member of the department with a broad skill set, administratively, perhaps quantitatively, who could assist the command staff with things like fleet management, crime analysis. There is no dedicated crime analyst in this agency. We do believe that it would greatly increase the operations of this agency if you were to provide that type of administrative support. And again, we think it's warranted in a growing department, just simply records requests, it being enhanced. It's more than one person's work. Non-sworns it's not a uniformed position, doesn't require it, but we do believe that it's warranted. This is our, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Those four on the right-hand side, are all four of those non-sworn, or is it one of them that says officer? Is that from the train?
Excellent question. Training officer, we believe at this point, with the growth of the department, we believe it should be a uniformed officer.
And the other three would not?
The others, records does not have to be, evidence does not have to be, and again, the non-sworn manager, no. You know, one thing that we did not really highlight this in the report, but we spoke to the chief, we spoke to the town manager about this. We believe, Certus believes, that you're in a unique position here in Rolesville, being as desirable a retirement location as you become. It's very likely that you could find a very qualified non-sworn individual who could perform several of these functions. Again, our preference always for training is a uniform, but certainly evidence management, a retiree to come in, somebody skilled, somebody who's done this before. We do believe that you should have several good options if you decide to go that way. So, getting beyond the analytical aspects of our report, what did we conclude? The research team, the study team believes that as Rolesville, as a community grows, the police services and the staffing are going to need to grow along with it. These proposed organizational charts, the recommended current, as well as the 15,000 and the 20,000. All right, we believe that those changes that are addressed in those charts will certainly be appropriate to support this growth, to advance this department for the foreseeable future as this department grows. The department, now the bad news, unfortunately, and I hate to preface it by saying that. This agency has really done an exceptional job of attracting and retaining qualified professionals, and they really should be applauded for that. Unfortunately, times have changed. Because of the world changing as it has, there is now a nationwide crisis, not just regional, crisis in police hiring. We noted, all four of us are college professors as well. We notice it with enrollments in criminal justice programs. Enrollments are down. Young men and women nowadays are not as inclined to go into the policing profession. And whether you attribute it to the defund the police movement or just Generation Z, we don't know the causes, but we know what the circumstances are. There are fewer applicants out there. So really, Rolesville has been blessed that you have been able to find thus far the people that you have, and it's a credit to the chief and his people. And it's also, Mr. Mayor, you made, when you were talking to the chief, you made such an important comment. the idea that it's not just the police department who should be applauded for the low crime rate here, it's the community. Policing is not something done at people, it's something done with people. So this is a very unique community, all right? And you're working hand in glove with this police department. Our fear is that as this crisis worsens, you're going to find it more and more difficult to find qualified applicants for your positions. So due to the anticipated rapid growth of the town and these dramatic changes in this hiring environment, we think that additional focus on recruitment and retention is really required here. And we say this for all the departments that, again, I've been to 35 states in the union doing these police studies. There's not one area of the country that is not experiencing a hiring crisis trying to find qualified police officers right now. So it's an extremely competitive market. It's changed the entire landscape. It's unlikely that past efforts are going to be sufficient when it comes to recruitment and retention. Those two issues are very linked. So in terms of the benefits that are offered to people who are interested in this police department, you have to make sure that you're competitive in terms of the entire package. We believe that the Rolesville PD has to work with the town. The PD is not going to be able to accomplish this on their own. They're going to have to work with you as a community to ensure that the hiring and the screening process is expedited without any consequent diminishment in quality of applicants. There's a bit of work that has to be done there. Communication with the applicants, again, Gen Z. I was teaching a public administration class last night. I'll be in the classroom again tomorrow. I could tell you that young men and women today need to be communicated with consistently, reminders, et cetera. And in the past, departments and communities that we've studied that would allow an individual to go uncontacted in the hiring process for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. In the past, the idea was, well, if they're motivated, they'll get back to us and they'll reach out to us, the town. That attitude really is, I think those days are over. What we have seen, and I'm sure many of you are aware, the phenomenon of poaching, that some departments, they're not as desirable as the RPD, as a final destination. This is a destination department. But other departments that are not are quite desperate to fill that gap. They don't have enough police officers. The overtime rates are really out of control. So what they've done as a strategy is to try to reach out to other police departments and get lateral transfers, poaching. You do not want to be a poacher or a poachee. Rolesville has not been thus far, but again, when you read this report in detail, you'll see several recommendations having to do with hiring and retention. We feel very strongly that the right efforts right now will ensure that this agency does well in the future. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You mentioned a destination department.
Yes.
How do you define that? Is that by retention rate or some kind of rate that you define?
That's a great, I have no data to support it other than the conversations. See, again, this is the qualitative aspect. To talk to these individuals, to talk to the officers, what made you come here? Where else were you looking? Right? We had these conversations, and for the entire team all concluded the same thing, that this department has been desirable, and relative to other departments, you have not lost large numbers. There is a slide on attrition I should show you, though. And again, it's a bit of a caveat. It's a bit of a caution. Since 2018, the Rolesville PD has hired 9 officers. However, as this chart shows, due to the rate of natural attrition, right, people who naturally are going to retire, who are going to leave the agency, there's really been no net increase during that time. 9 were hired, 9 retired or resigned. But that's good in this environment. We have clients that are down, and potential clients that are literally down 200 police officers. And we don't know where they're going to find those individuals to fill in. So the big question for American policing, not just for the Rolesville community, is how do we attract and how do we retain the quality personnel that we've had in the past? We believe the answer is competitive salary and benefits package. Our recommendation is that the police department here in Rolesville must ensure that its officers are not drawn off to other departments for financial reasons. You have to be well aware of what your competitors are offering in terms of packages. Getting back to the need for community engagement, I mentioned this before, but this is a very, relative to other engagements that we've had, this is one of the fastest growing communities that we've seen. And again, every one of those developments would really like to see a police officer every so often to come and meet with the homeowners association. There's a lot of security surveys that need to be done. There'll be a lot of requests for that. So we believe that starting now, whenever you can, this department should create a new full-time community engagement officer. That position could have ancillary duties as well. But the primary mission is community engagement. We were quite impressed by the fact that this agency, this department, has currently a reserve officer program. Many of our clients do not, and we recommend creating one. Reserve officers are not auxiliary volunteers. They are police officers who could be used part-time. They are trained, they are skilled. Now, the reserve officer program currently in the Rolesville PD, I don't think I'm overstating it by saying it's not flourishing, it's not large, there's not a large number of individuals there. But going forward, we believe it could be leveraged. Getting back to the idea again that some individual age 42 retired from the Boston Police Department or Baltimore and wishes to retire here, but that's a 42-year-old. There's 15 to 20 years of service, a highly qualified individual who's coming to this community who might very well be a reserve officer. We believe there's really quite a lot of potential here going forward. The chief, the captain, they're well aware of this. They know going forward that this could be leveraged as well. We mentioned again the administrative support. That second paragraph you'll see on the slide. Again, it's not, we don't have an algorithm for this, but it's just logical to think that a 20% increase in town population will translate roughly to a 20% increase in public information requests, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, is the time to prepare for this. Anticipated. If the growth was not as inevitable as it is here, perhaps we would tone down this recommendation a bit, but this is a very strong recommendation. You do need administrative support. Again, we believe that just like you can't wait for the vacancy to occur before you fill it with a police officer, you have to project out. You have to put someone in the academy now for that vacancy that's going to happen several months from now. We believe now is the time to build capacity for this department. Facilities, I don't have to tell you what you already know. Your current facility has outlived its useful life, but it's functional. There are some recommendations in there, but ultimately, the fact that you are making plans, you're ahead of the curve, and it is warranted. And then some final notes. Remember I said that our methodology really here is just a way to look at this police department and attempt to answer the question, how does it think? How does it plan? How does it measure its work? The agency is currently doing a fine job of that, and we believe that it's well positioned to continue to do so in the future. The chief has already begun initial efforts to do a multi-year strategic plan. We highly, highly recommend that. Not enough police departments take the time to do it and to do that well. Strategic plans that actually announce in advance performance targets. We intend to, for example, motor vehicle accidents with personal injuries. Several departments that have effective strategic plans, when they know they've got an issue with a particular condition such as that, in the strategic plan, it gets identified, it gets targeted, as a performance indicator, the number of accidents are going to be measured. And then the agency, through this plan, is literally saying in advance, we're going to reduce those accidents by 10% in the next 2 years. And if we didn't meet that goal, right, if we only reduced it by 8%, we reduced it by 8%. And now, gap analysis, now we only have that 2% to address. We do believe that currently the management system that's in place here is sufficient. But we feel that a multi-year strategic plan, to be a little more strategic, to be a little more transparent and accountable to the public, would be recommended. Again, few police departments have real strategic plans. For purposes of accreditation, many times they have a 1 or a 2-page document that is really a to-do list. It looks like the shopping list that my wife gives me when I go to the supermarket. It's really not a strategic, multi-year strategic plan. But this department has begun the process to begin to think that way, and they should be applauded for that. The agency, as you know, is not nationally accredited. All right. However, we believe in the future they could very well be. They're very well positioned for that. And we believe that if they act upon the recommendations in this report, they're going to be very well positioned to obtain that. Should you decide to do so, state accreditation could be sufficient. It's a consideration for the town. So, conclusions. And again, thank you for your patience here, my lengthy presentation. But our conclusions are pretty clear, and they're pretty strong. The Rolesville PD is a highly functional agency. It really is an excellent agency. The quality of the management and the quality of the dedication of these officers, these members of this agency to the community is really outstanding. The department now has an opportunity to leverage these findings going forward. We encourage you to do so. We believe that the structure of the organization is sound. The patrol schedule that we examined, the recommendations that we've made here, we believe it's well designed. The deployment, the staffing that we recommend, we believe is, again, sufficient to move the department forward over the next several years. The strategic planning and the management process, we actually, in the report, you will see, we actually made recommendations about the conduct of monthly management meetings, what an agenda would look like, et cetera, et cetera. We believe that by engaging in this process, by staffing these positions properly, by giving the resources to the agency that we recommend, that this police department will more than serve the needs of this community for the next several years. And that's it. Thank you very much.
I have a couple of questions for
available
you.
for any questions that you might have. Yes, ma'am.
A couple of screens back, when you said move a lieutenant over,
Yes.
how does that work for that lieutenant, like in terms of ranking? Like, how does that work? Do they lose their lieutenant or they don't?
They'll stay the same rate.
Okay. And for the civilian personnel, would that be full-time as well, or just filling in gaps?
Full-time.
Yeah, we believe full-time.
Okay. This is not a big deal. I'm just a little curious, though. When you move the evidence position to non-sworn, how does that work?
We already have that recommendation now. Our current evidence custodian or evidence specialist is a retired captain from Wake Forest Police Department.
Right.
So he is part-time and he is non-sworn.
And he, by the way, is doing an excellent job. He
Right.
certainly got a clean bill of health by Dr. Long when he looked at the property and evidence management.
Okay, so they were once sworn and now not sworn, or could it be somebody who's never been a retired police officer? How does that work?
As far as property?
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, can I address that? Is that
Sure,
okay?
Monty, please.
So, there's different models. And so one of the things that let me just say this at the outset, that I found the Rolesville Police Department, it was well-led and well-managed. And I found that the officers were proactive and they were invested in public safety in the town of Rolesville. And in speaking with the executive staff, they demonstrated, innovative thinking and creative solutions to the challenges that they were aware of that they face. Now, with respect to the evidence and property position, and I told the chief, I said, Chief, it was brilliant of you to hire that individual, the retired captain from Wake Forest, because this individual actually took the Wake Forest Police Department through the accreditation process specifically for evidence and property. And so this individual is well-positioned, not sworn, to lead the Rolesville evidence and property function through that process should you choose to get state or national accreditation. These are the sorts of things that are occurring within the police department, and it's clear with the outcome in terms of performance measures. The department is clicking on all cylinders. It is a great and wonderful police department, and collectively we came to the conclusion that this is a destination police department. This is where someone wants to come and work and stay there for their entire careers. So can it be performed by a person who was never a police officer? Yes, but that was a strategic hire that the chief made there. It was just absolutely brilliant.
Okay. All right, so I have two other questions. Is there still a captain level with a deputy?
Still the captain level.
But you said deputy.
I said going forward, as the department grows and new personnel comes in, there'll be additional responsibilities. And in terms of leadership and in terms of building a deep bench for succession planning for this agency, it should probably, at some point, become a deputy chief
So it's
position.
chief, deputy chief, and captain still?
Yes.
All right. So I know that the chief, we had a conversation where everybody's kind of cross-trained to whatever extent that they can be. Will that still take place with all of the different roles that you're?
It's certainly
reassigning?
encouraged, and it's, again, good for morale and just building the skill sets of the people that you have. To go to school to be a public information officer, even though you might not be the department's public information person. But yeah, I think they've done a very good job at that. They should continue it going forward, yes.
I would just say, this is not a question. The poaching part,
Yep.
I think that's always going to happen in Rolesville because of the community that Rolesville is, the numbers that we're showing. So I think poaching is out there.
Yeah.
I just hope that we are able to follow what you have suggested to make this, to have this town continue to be the town that it is. But with that said, people are going to want to come, I hope, and I'm referring to police officers. But I do feel that, the poaching is going to happen everywhere. It's never going to stop.
No.
So, but that's not a question. That's just my personal opinion.
You're again touching on this point that, well, I'll leave it at that. Your point was well said.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other questions from the board?
Great report. I was thoroughly impressed. I'm like, wow, these people are extremely detailed, and it's a great report.
We tried not to shock and awe with the detail, which again is why, before I leave, I'll give you my card. Any questions for me or any member of the team, would be more than happy to follow up with you.
You mentioned a little about the facilities, and I think I jotted down and did some assessments on it. How important is facilities to effective police department? And also how important it is to retained employees? I know probably the main things is pay and benefits, but once you get by that, is it important for one to have facilities to retain them?
Yeah. It's more than just feng shui and aesthetics. It's functionality. A locker room that's appropriate for all the equipment that these officers today have to carry and equip themselves with. They should not be storing items in their personal vehicles or at home. We have been in police departments where the detective bureau, the investigators are actually in a separate building. That's like the family dinner table being cut in half, and 3 of them are there and the other 2 are here. Form is function. So the design of a police department is very important. And again, while perhaps a member of the community might think that locker rooms are really extraneous, that it doesn't matter. It really does. In terms of the efficiency of those officers, in terms of morale. So we at Certus believe that a cookie cutter approach to building a facility should be avoided at all costs, that it has to be built around the agency and built around a growing agency for these projections going forward. But if you engage both the department and the council and members of the community, I'm sure you could ultimately. But again, the current facility, we did not see any, when we came here, we told both the town manager and the chief, if we see nice to haves in terms of recommendations, you'll see that in the report. If it's a need to have, we'll tell you while we're here. We did not see any red alert liability need to haves right now. But there are some recommendations in there about the facility in particular, the processing room, that we were not happy with what we saw. That has to be changed. It is functional now. I think the chief came up with a pretty elegant workaround in terms of not having an officer alone in that room with the prisoner by him or herself. But ultimately, you need an adequate processing room in your new facility.
Thank you. Any other board? Thank you. Chief, you want to close it out? Maybe anybody that's listening in, any closing comments from them? No?
Auntie, any Carol? No?
No further comments.
Okay.
All yours, Chief.
All yours, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for letting us conduct this organizational assessment. It's going to be instrumental for us now and for 5-10 years down the road. It's going to give us a great baseline. As y'all can see from the report, it was very in-depth, and it was not something that occurred over a week's time. It was something that has occurred over months, from the captain supplying the CAD data, staffing, stats. It's been a very long but good process. And I can't say enough about this team that we've had to work with. Although at times we had to take some breaks and come back together because we were at it, because again, they were only on site for 2 days. So it was a very brief introduction, and then they hit the ground running immediately when they were here at 8 o'clock in the morning. So the team was excellent to work with. We felt like they have given us a report with some excellent recommendations, some that we have already started putting in place even before now. And we're going to continue working with the staff, here and at the police department with the command staff on implementing all of these measures. So again, thank you all. Thank you for coming down. Dr. Paul? Yes, sir.
And next week, in your budget retreat on the 28th, you'll start to see how we intend to kind of start addressing these recommendations, so.
Yep. Well, thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
all of you for coming out.
Thank you.
Being from the New York Police Department, I've been watching that on TV for 30, 40 years, and everybody knows the New York Police Department. I mean,
NYPD.
from Blue Bloods and all the rest of it. But
You said Iona, right?
Iona University, actually, yes.
So did you, Oh, New Rochelle? Okay, Westchester.
So I know Rolesville is much different than New York, but,
A little bit, a
yeah.
little tiny bit. for
But
now.
I do appreciate you guys coming. Sure do. Thank you. Okay, the next item was to be the agreement between Town of Rolesville and the Rolesville Rural Fire Department, sort of a discussion on that. I think we got a formal letter to yesterday. They are meeting tonight, so their board of directors are meeting tonight, look at the agreements that has been made in the last few weeks, and they did a formal request to let them meet first before we start publicly talking about it and making any comments and decisions. So let's get it rescheduled from their perspective, and appreciate you understanding that. Only other item we got is, I think the attorney requested a closed session.
Yes, sir. And I believe the board members may have that form of motion that's required by the statute.
Yep, Paul has it.
Yep. I move that the board go into closed session to consult with the town attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to Chapter 143, Section 318.11A3 of the North Carolina General Statutes. Among other items, the board expects to receive counsel regarding the following proceedings: Edens, Khalil, Privet Properties, LLC, and Roel.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We in closed session. Thank you.
There's an after-hours event Thursday, the chamber.
Yeah, it
Greenway.
is. I think it's a ribbon cutting.
All the way to
cutting.
Point.
Yeah, I think it
Greenway?
is too.
It's a ribbon cutting, I believe, involved in it too, so, yeah.
Mayor Kern, for your March 28th special meeting, you will have my associate Aaron here, Deputy Town Attorney. I will be on vacation in DC, twice postponed, so
Okay.
finally doing that.
That's the budget workshop?
Correct.
3 o'clock.
Okay. Cool. That's actually next week, right?
Tuesday.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Thank you, board. We get out of here a little bit early tonight, so thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion, a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Thank you, board. Appreciate that.
Aye.